Welcome, friends. I invite you to just take a moment with the music and let it come through you. Thank you so much for being here today, friends. I'll leave the music on low as we get started here. My name is Carrie Kopnick, and I serve the Chaplaincy Institute as our community minister. I'm so glad that you're here today joining us. ChI Talks is, as you probably know, a monthly event exploring facets of spirituality through an interfaith lens with the ChI community. Every month on the third Tuesday, we invite you to join us for a different topic. Today we're recording our session, so if you wish not to be on camera, please turn off your video and your image won't appear on the recording. We'll have some time at the end for questions about today's topic or about the Chaplaincy Institute. A little bit about ChI. The Chaplaincy Institute provides education for those seeking to serve in hospitals, hospices, disasters, prisons, corporations, military, educational settings, as activists and in environmental contexts, as well as spiritual companions. We are the oldest and most respected interfaith seminary in the United States. We're the grandmother. Our ordination or faith group endorsement is recognized by the Association of Professional Chaplains, the Veterans Administration, and the military. If you'd like to learn more about today's topic, you can reach out to us to learn about the open course that we have that's happening on May 18th and 19th, and it's called Psychedelics, Entheogens, and Spiritual Care. I'd like to take a moment to welcome Chaplain Jennifer Hapke. Thanks so much for being with us today. And let me share a little bit about Jennifer with our beloved friends. Jennifer ordained from ChI in October of last year. In December of last year, she received her certificate of completion as a psilocybin facilitator from one of Oregon's first psilocybin training facilities. She's awaiting her state certification as a facilitator. During her three years as a student at ChI, she underwent several psychedelic journeys. The first created a significant and lasting paradigm shift in her relationship with the divine. Jennifer is the mother of 2 adult children and has been married for almost 33 years. She considers the opportunity to be a mother among the most significant experiences of her life. Her growing and expanding relationship with Divine Mother has supported, sustained, and fed her spiritual seeking and longing since that first psychedelic journey. Thank you so much for being with us here today, Jennifer. I'll turn the music all the way down. Thank you so much for sharing with us today. I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Carrie. It's so good to see familiar names and faces I do see a member of my facilitation cohort here. That's fun. And welcome to names that I am not familiar with. So thank you all for being here. I want to begin with 3 acknowledgements. I am currently living in Yamhill County. The county was named for the original inhabitants of this area, the Yamhill Indians, a tribe of the Kayapuyyan family. This tribe was forced to join the Grand Ronde Reservation in 1855. I state this to honor those who came before and to honor their place here and to remember our responsibilities. I also want to acknowledge the Indigenous people whose ceremonial and traditional practices inform what has been able to emerge today in the field of psychedelics. May we be cautious, aware, and worthy of working with these plant allies. And finally, I want to recognize my friends and colleagues from my facilitation program who so generously shared with me portions of their psilocybin journeys that they hold as spiritual experiences. I'd like to request that we hold these stories as precious reminders of what they hold as sacred. I am speaking to you from the state of Oregon, where Measure 109 was passed in November 2020. The Oregon Health Authority licensed and regulates the manufacture, transport, delivery, sale, and purchase of psilocybin products and services. Our facilitation cohort was the second cohort to complete the state requirements for psilocybin facilitated certification. The testimonials I'm sharing today were psilocybin administered sessions in a ceremonial group setting at a licensed service center. There are 2 exceptions. A portion of my story involving an MDMA session, and I'll reference an ayahuasca journey of one of my classmates done legally outside the US. I'm biased. I believe that there is a place for psychedelics and psychedelic chaplains to inform, expand, and shift our understanding of the divine. I also have a broad and developing view of what I believe constitutes a spiritual experience. I define it as an experience that awakens hope and connection, something seen or felt that feels both new and maybe familiar, both in our usual states of reality as well as through altered states of consciousness. If you'd like to join me, I'm going to shift now to a brief meditation that I've borrowed from a collection of spiritual teachings. For this meditation, you might feel more comfortable with eyes closed or downcast, or your camera's off. Think about someone or something that lights you up with joy. This could be a place in nature, could be a favorite memory, but choose something that's uncomplicated. To muse upon it creates in you a kind of automatic inner smile. Now that you've made your selection, invite all of the good feelings invited by this topic to fill you up. Now turn your attention to your body. Begin to notice what you feel. First, notice where you mostly feel these sensations and the quality. Are they warm or cool? Bright or diffuse? As you focus on these sensations, do they stay steady? Maybe they rise and fall. Just to accentuate the connection, You might put your hand for a moment on that place where the sensations were the strongest for you. Take another moment here. If your hand is still connected to that place, you can put it at rest and take a deep breath. Because we're each wired differently in a physical sense, we feel these sensations in different ways in different parts of our body. But the essence of the experience is the same. The essence is expansion. Expansion is the state of openness and connection that allows us to be present to what is flowing through us and also allows us to be present to what is going on outside of us. Knowing what a state of expansion feels like inside of you is so important because in order to be present in any moment or situation, we need to be in an expanded state. We don't need to be feeling any particular emotion like the one I asked you to invoke to create expansion, but it's the quality of openness that's required. Let's take another breath. Thank you. The use of psilocybin mushrooms dates back as far as 9000 BC. This has been around for a very long time. And it was brought to the US back in the late 50s and early 60s, not long after a mycologist, Robert Gordon Wasson, traveled to Mexico and observed their ceremonial usage. He wrote about his experience in Life magazine in a 1957 issue called Seeking the Magic Mushroom. As I mentioned earlier, I'm sharing with you excerpts from the psilocybin facilitation colleagues, largely drawn from our practicum experiences. I'll reference their first names here: Marcus, Rachel, Matt, Jean, Carrie, Amber, and David. What emerged for me in the course of these interviews with my classmates were large themes present in most of their retellings. And I'd like to move through those themes with excerpts from each of them. You know, when they say, I feel like I got so much more in return? Well, that's what happened for me in the process of preparing for this talk today. And I'm so grateful to share this with you. There are some standard practices that have been established when folks choose to journey. It's often accompanied with a comfortable place to lay down. Our facilitation center calls these foam pads launch pads. We also wear soft, light darkening eye shades, and music plays throughout the journey. In fact, if you caught the music playing while you arrived today, that's from a local artist, East Forest, whose music often shows up in journey playlists. When people are preparing to journey, it's not uncommon to hear folks report a feeling that the medicine of the mushroom is already working weeks and months ahead of time, ahead of the journey. Amber shared that a month or two prior to her journey, she began to re-engage with the theme of cultural displacement, a theme she could feel present in her awareness each day. Others share being drawn to the journey. Matt's drawing came from a sense of restlessness and discontent. Although not present in the same way in Indigenous journeys, our facilitated contemporary journeys are combined with an intention. What are you wanting to learn? Know, explore, or ask from the mushrooms? Intentions become important for a variety of reasons that can be explored in another talk. David shared his intention came from a place of confusion about his place in the world and his relationship to work. what was next for him? A prior journey he had felt destabilizing as childhood trauma came forward. Perhaps the next journey would be a continuation of that. He also said he didn't feel entirely confident or clear about what he was here on earth for or what he had to offer. Gene was just simply hoping for a mystical experience, and he received that. Rachel was confronting feelings of being numb or frozen. I love this. She said she knew the pilot light was on, but she needed something radical to spark it. My intention was simply as an introduction. It was my first journey with psilocybin, and I simply wanted to share a portion of who I am. And can you, the mushrooms, show me a portion of who you are? What does journeying feel like? I'll admit this is hard to describe. Most people say there aren't words for it. But Amber says it's like reuniting with old friends. Rachel gratefully referenced being able in journeys to feel her late father's presence. Journeying can often evoke physical sensations and somatic responses. In this very tender conversation with Carrie, she shared while undergoing an ayahuasca journey, she felt as though she was dying through suffocation, a sense of being buried alive. And from there, she felt herself turning into a baby, which made her fearful. Fearful she was disappearing and wouldn't remember anything. A sense that she might lose everything. She has since done a lot of integration around her childhood sexual abuse. Amber shared that her journey began by feeling like she couldn't get comfortable. She moved around a lot and has now recognized the role that that discomfort played when she deepened into her ancestors' historic displacement and the cultural displacement she continues to work with. Many of my colleagues shared that their journeys imparted a kind of knowing, an imparting of wisdom and information that they received through their body and their mind. In Amber's case, she had direct engagement with the mushrooms, asking them, what is my role with this medicine? The answer that came back was that she'd been hiding. She has experience and skill that she hasn't been sharing. Through her long phases of internal work, it is now time to turn it outward. Additionally, she described her experience like a screen or a veil that was lifted. She could see the true nature of life, as well as the spirit realm. It opened access to her late parents and other people who had died in a kind of dialogue with them and the medicine. Gene lovingly shared that after seeing in his journey growing gray clouds, a bright yellow-white light emerged, and he knew it to be a divine light or energy. And from that light, a jade-colored light came forward, and he knew it was his late wife. There was no face or no body, but he had a deep and connective time with this energy. After sharing this, he said he understands how our ego and our default mode networks inhibit our connection and knowing, and how psychedelics can allow for that access. Rachel shared her belief that mushrooms hold wisdom and a knowing within themselves, that she experiences an intuitive sense of when to journey. The mushrooms speak and call me to it. As a result of her journeys, she has a much deeper felt sense of interconnectedness. Along with this felt knowing, many are shown symbols to make meaning of. Marcus so clearly wrote about his self and soul as represented through the image of an egg. He writes, I journeyed into the deepest core of my being, my spirit. And in this realm, I experienced aspects of my shadow self. Inside this experience was the image of an egg, the outer layers of which I was moving towards and through were filled with feelings and emotions of self-judgment. It felt as though these experiences were not just from this lifetime, but from many lives and through a lineage within this life. There was so much unworthiness within these layers, so much sadness, pain, grief. Yet there was a very clear knowing that within this within this egg, was my liberation, my true self, my authentic nature, the gift I came to share that is uniquely mine. David's aged dog showed up, communicating acceptance and love. He shared that in life, he had never given this dog a fair chance because he always compared him to his prior dog and the ways in which his current dog had challenging behaviors that just didn't measure up. But in the journey, what he saw was this dog's qualities of sweetness, tenderness, and loyalty, which then helped David extend beyond himself and extend the same awareness in growing concentric circles that included the people in his life. Amber was gifted a view of the city of Portland and a sense that she was observing the body of Portland. She saw its energy and flowing waters and all of the human activity. And knowing that she was a part of that activity, but of something bigger. She was not a part of that activity, but of something bigger. A huge awareness that I'm from somewhere really different from anyone else in this room. And she began to feel her ancestors from the east, from the Mississippi River. She now understands more deeply her own uprootedness, and that she carries a knowing and way of being that is multi-layered and somatic. It was a spiritual experience. In understanding, she carries a different way of being that doesn't fit with the modern world. She called it an almost existential differentness. Beyond the symbols is the larger scope of what can be accessed. I do wish there was a way for each of these participants to share these experiences with you directly so that you could hear their voice, see their face, and hear the magnitude of their experiences. Marcus writes about his processing emotions and pain of self and beyond, that he had profound clarity within the reality of what we call life and death, feelings of such incredible peace. All the fear of living dissolved, and I was in total peace and harmony. Matt experienced a oneness with the world, awe and connectedness, feelings of peace that this is what life could feel like. I like this visual he shared with me. He described it like a series of buckets, a bucket of love, one of contentment and work, and they were all full. He says, I used to think the buckets were filled externally, but I realized that they are filled internally. He referenced his habit of always looking outside of himself for comfort and support. And now he realizes that he can do that for himself. He found his internal resourcing. In moving beyond the journey, he spoke of how easy it is to get caught up in everything else, and that this prevents us from really being in these sacred spaces. And I'll reference my first experience here with MDMA in a facilitated setting. In short, it was a conversion experience. I was met with a small portion of the power, justice, and love of Divine Mother. I want to share that prior to this experience, my only orientation to the divine was through the masculine form. In fact, in my origin faith, to consider God in any other form other than masculine was sacrilege. But that journey imparted a quality of knowing that has not shifted. Instead, it has rooted and grown into a full honoring of the divine feminine in all her forms. I'll also say here that one of the biggest things I struggle with is forgetting. Forgetting that I'm not alone. Forgetting that to extend compassion to others more fully, I must have compassion for myself. And to work with fear is to remember love. Last week, I was driving in the car, driving home from errands with the radio on, and thinking about this talk. And a line from a Paul Simon song jumped out at me. I've heard this lyric many times, but that day I heard it differently. He sings, "This is the story of how we begin to remember. This is the powerful pulsing of love in our veins." What has all this meant for my friends and myself beyond our journeys? David shared his experience of being more comfortable in his own skin. He now carries the realization that the discomfort he felt previously was within him, not outside of him. He can now connect differently with difficult relatives with more compassion and less judgment. Here it is again, a sense of interconnectedness. And that by accepting himself, he can accept others as a part of himself. He's also less fearful of death and dying, and he knows it now as a changing of form and energy. He also talked about his appreciation of the many forms of love, the way his journey expanded his understanding of love. With a lightness in his voice, he shares his connection to a greater sense of awe, inspiration, and imagination. Carrie shared that her psychedelic experiences helped her to clear trauma, making space for the release of patterns, like emptying a vessel of intergenerational trauma. That what she underwent was her, and it also extended beyond her. She experienced a female initiation into darkness, and then it opened up the realm of divine feminine. And in that clearing, she has made room for goodness, happiness, and a feeling that the universe is benevolent and ordered. She has a more regulated nervous system and a greater ability to trust. She is reclaiming the stolen parts of herself. She said, "It was me and so much more beyond me." Amber feels empowered. She shared, "This is what it feels like to be in my power. It's vitalizing." She has a spiritual knowing that she admitted can be hard to maintain, but she accepts this difficulty as necessary periods of expansion and contraction, that there is a compensatory nature in these polarities, not unlike agony and ecstasy. Rachel feels deeply connected to so much more. Her experiences have instilled a trust in the medicine, that the medicine helped to make her connection to spirit. She no longer tries to force things in her life. Her hands are up in trust, trust that she'll continue to meet the people and opportunities in the right time. As a final question to my colleagues, I asked them, how do they try to connect to these experiences after their journeys? Marcus writes, when I allow myself to feel this even now, I feel such simplicity and peace in the moment. I feel my center of gravity that is pure and true. David shared that he uses mindfulness and a practice of letting go and surrendering to tap into love and the unexpected forms of the divine, that it's easier to drop into when he's in a mindful or expansive state. Rachel continues her connection through prayer. She shared her grandmother was Christian and modeled a kind of prayer Rachel continues. She spends time at her altar and has been able to recognize her changing relationship to grief. Jean has adopted the discernment tool of seasoning, something he says he's borrowed from the Quakers. He believes that clarity comes with time, to let things sit and see what emerges. And I continue to connect with my psychedelic experiences through prayer, time in nature, music that brings me back to the spaciousness and goodness these medicines allowed me to access. It's been a joy to share these experiences with you. In an effort to hold the fullness of this field, it's also important to be aware of the concerns and pitfalls that are present. I'm sharing the following 5 issues from a talk Valeria McCarroll gave. You might recognize her name from an upcoming class at ChI called Psychedelics, Entheogens, and Spiritual Care. I think Carrie mentioned that already. It's happening next month, and I'll take a moment here to share one of the books she's recommending for the class. If you're curious about the history of Christianity and the role of psychedelics in early history, I recommend this book. It's been very interesting to read. In her talk, she highlights the issue of money as a pitfall, potential pitfall and concern, and the question of who stands to profit from these medicines when legalization continues to grow, and the fact that it's currently available to a small minority who can afford to pay for it. The issue of power and privilege between facilitator or researcher and the participant. On the subject of power, for example, psychedelic chaplains need to have an awareness of our personal beliefs and to be cautious about infusing our beliefs onto someone who's in a very susceptible and open state. Additionally, in our journey spaces, what images are hanging on the walls? What does the music we provide suggest? We also need to recognize our biases and experiences with respect to diversity and race as a result of our education, the opportunities we've had, financial resources, and our privilege in general. Along with cultural appropriation and communication. For example, if one has borrowed cultural symbols or objects in their spaces, do they speak to their meaning? Do we take time to speak to the history and acknowledge the indigenous practices that we're building upon? And finally, integration and spiritual bypass. In her talk, Valeria references a statistic that my facilitation colleagues are familiar with. 30% of a psychedelic experience is the journey, and 70% is the integration of the journey. There is a pitfall of attaching the experience and feeling to the journey, not to the work of integration, to bypass the reality of our bodies and integrating instead of what we've been shown. It is the work of rooting instead in a belief and understanding that feeds us and is fed, that nurtures us and is nurtured, and that helps us to live and is lived. I want to close with a couple of lines from Jean Lohman's poem, Praise What Comes. At the end, there may be no answers and only a few simple questions. Did I love? Finish my task in the world? Learn at least one of the many names of God? At the intersections, the boundaries where one life began and another ended, the jumping off places between fear and possibility, at the ragged edges of pain, did I catch the smallest glimpse of the holy? Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jennifer. That was moving and beautiful.
Thank you.
Now's the time for questions or comments or about the Chaplaincy Institute, about the topic. I'd love to hear some of your stories too. I think Jennifer would be open to that. So I'll open the floor. I understand this can be a little, feel a little vulnerable too. So I want to acknowledge that.
No pressure.
Hey, so I'm so happy to have found this. A friend of mine, not a friend, a colleague, pointed me in this direction. I'm a hospital chaplain, and my first experience with what was acid was in November. It was in November, and all the searching I've ever done in my entire quest, this has been the single most spiritual experience of my entire life. And it kind of changed the way I chaplain. It kind of changed everything. Just this one time, I saw so much. But I live in a state where this is not legal, and I don't know how to share these spiritual experiences with my patients that wouldn't get me in trouble for mentioning that I drop acid. You know what I mean? It's just like it seems like this beautiful healing experience is a secret, and I don't understand that, and I don't know, how do I deal with these patients now?
Yeah. I think, and it's strange, I don't really feel equipped to be answering some of this question. So, in my humbleness, I'll say that I think, in the ways of connecting to that experience and what it planted in you, that what you're offering your patients emanates from that. It's not so much the specifics of what you experienced, but it's speaking from the place that has now undergone a shift. And I'll also say, in our practicum experience, we have people in the program who have been doing this work underground, and for many of them to sit in a space that was entirely legal brought tears to their eyes. To be above ground and doing it legally, it was something I couldn't appreciate, but I did appreciate how impactful it was for them to have that experience. So yeah, it remains to be seen what happens in the rest of the US. Oregon does not have a perfect solution. there are issues, and I think most people are hopeful that the good people that are in charge of making these decisions are holding the reins well.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Just have a comment. So much of what we do at the bedside and hospital chaplaining is bringing in our own connection with the divine, and and that boundary, right? That little veil between our experience and the person we serve. I'm sure it's difficult, AJ, not to bring your entire self there and to feel underground. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing that.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah. Tanya, did I see your hand?
Yeah, I was going to second a lot of what you said, Jen, and let AJ know that I understand what they're feeling. I am an underground practitioner. I do not live in the state of Oregon, but yet I did the Inner Trek program and was in Jen's cohort as well. I think that bringing your experience, AJ, into it just is a matter of different language. Like, you wouldn't have to say, this is what I experienced on LSD. You can bring in all the aspects of it in different ways, in different language, and use it. And I think that that's kind of how I address different clients with different perspectives, and is not just leaving it a little open, I guess, kind of like the experience. But yeah, I think there's ways of doing it, of being able to have your feeling and convey that to others without maybe using the specifics.
Thank you, Tanya.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And like I said, it already has changed the way I chaplain. I just wish I could be a little bit more open about it, but I am so grateful for the opportunity that I have right now. And for now, this is, I guess, the opportunity I'm supposed to have. And it'll just grow from there, I guess.
I'm going to jump in with a question, Jen.
Mm.
What do you see as your ministry? You're an ordained clergy member now, and this is what you're also trained to do. I mean, you could do a million different things because I know you to be gifted and beautiful and wonderful. And what is your dream? How does this move for you?
Yeah. Well, I would love to be in facilitation circles. I think part of what came about in these interviews was, in a sense, just by asking the questions, it helped my colleagues to tap back into that, to give it another form just by putting voice to it. So certainly they had the felt experience and the knowing, and being given the opportunity to speak to it brought it alive in another way. So I think that there's a need there. I think it's not uncommon to have spiritual experiences and to find ways to make meaning of that, especially if it, creates an entire paradigm shift. What does this mean? How do I engage with this? How do I bring this forward in my life in real and meaningful ways? So for right now, to have opportunities like that would be wonderful. And it is one of the shortfalls of the program in the rollout, right? Time was at hand, the election was coming, things needed to be put in motion to roll it out effectively. And one of the shortfalls of the program was that they did not develop a mentoring program for those of us who weren't coming with a lot of prior experience. We still really want to get connected with senior facilitators. And so, you know, they recognize it. They recognize that it's a shortfall and they're working to do something about that, but it takes time. It takes time to implement those kinds of programs and to be able to connect people and then track that. So for now, many of us are sort of floating out there trying to find these isolated experiences where we can practice and learn.
Could open your own healing center. Sorry.
You can come join me.
I would love to do that. I'm just north.
Yeah.
Oh my
Well,
goodness.
you know, there are psychedelic churches, and yeah, it's exciting, and I just because of who I am, I like to pump the brakes too. Yeah.
Okay, there are psychedelic churches. I will stop talking in a minute and open up, but there are psychedelic churches. Wow.
Mhm. Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, I've been part of a beautiful tea ceremony, multi-hour tea ceremony that, you know, this was microdosing. So, you know, not a large trip at all, but yeah, just beautiful ways to engage with it, and people are bringing their own creativity to that as they feel called.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah.
Who else has questions or comments or wants to speak to their experience? I will. So interesting. Oh, Jim.
Hi, Jim.
Hi. On a practical level, do you anticipate doing this one-on-one with an individual for a 2, 3, 4 hour session, or is it group, co-facilitated groups? How do you see yourself practicing?
My preference is I love cooperative working. So my preference would be in a collective with, you know, multiple facilitators, 3 facilitators, in a larger group. And I will say, you know, the length of a journey is largely dependent on the dosage. So the journeys are more like 6 to 7 hours. And, you know, a lot of things can come up in somebody's journey, and really painful things, difficult things. I know from my own comfort level, I would feel much better if there were a group of facilitators present, all bringing their own unique skills and abilities. I think that that creates a really well-held container. And in my prior experiences, they were one-on-one. And they were incredible experiences too. So my personal preference would be in a group setting. Yeah, and well, I don't know if we want to get into it, but you know, there's this sort of profound difference between recreational use and use in a facilitated setting with intention and facilitation. I have largely through my conversations with my fellow facilitation colleagues, my opinion of recreational use has shifted. I have a more open view of that. But that's as far as it is. It's just an open view. I think that the biggest benefit comes from an intentional, facilitated ceremonial setting.
Did the law that was passed in Oregon open it to recreational use, or is it intended for facilitated?
Yeah, it's all governed and held by the Oregon Health Authority.
Right.
So no, and you know, there's a lot of misinformation around that. So that's been part of, just by virtue of being able to speak to it openly, to say that I have my certification as a psilocybin facilitator. It, you know, naturally garners all kinds of questions. And so a lot of what I've been doing is just speaking to that, you know, because of the history of psychedelics and how it got attached to all of the other Schedule 1 drugs. There's just a lot of misinformation. You know, if we open this up, it means there are going to be people wandering around and they'll be having bad trips and so on. And I sort of lost my train of thought there, but anyway, yeah, just re-educating people. These drugs that I'm speaking to do not fit the qualification of Schedule 1 drugs. They are non-addictive. There is no known legal dose of psilocybin. So when you match them up with other Schedule 1 drugs, that's it's not a fair comparison. Unfortunately, they've all gotten lumped together. So I think that's part of our work too, is just trying to shed some light on the science and the truth of what's there.
Thanks for your questions, Jim. I think those are questions a lot of people have.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, and they're fair questions, you know, and I love it when people ask. It's just another opportunity to share what we know.
I'm usually good at silence, but I have so many questions. Are there other states that have passed laws that are similar to Oregon's?
Colorado,
Okay.
I think they sort of led the charge there. And I know that Washington and California are certainly watching what Oregon has done. And, you know, with some success, I think the cities of Oakland and Santa Cruz maybe have more legal, a little bit more of a legal framework that they're exercising. And, you know, I think the research that's coming out of, you know, some of our larger institutions and universities, Johns Hopkins and Yale and Princeton and so on, it's very compelling work. I think that the MAPS program that's studying the use of MDMA in post-traumatic stress disorder, it's all very encouraging. And I think that was a good place to start, is with PTSD and working with veterans. I think most people inherently understand that what PTSD might look like for a veteran coming home. And it makes it more palatable, if you will. But more importantly, it's offering hope and help.
Thank you. We are coming to the end of our time. Oh, Tanya says there's a lot in legislation currently: Boston, Iowa, Texas, Iowa. Wow, lots of states.
That's my home state. So yeah, I would have the same response. Iowa, wow.
Yeah, there's a lot in legislation. So there's a lot being proposed. It's just a matter of whether or not the legislation will go ahead and apply it. But I think with the psilocybin and MDMA being in the FDA approval currently and probably making it through by October, that a lot of states don't want to be left behind. So anybody who's in the legislature right now will be docketing for how much, I mean, unfortunately, this is the part that I don't like, is they're going to docket for how much that they can make and what it's going to mean to their healthcare systems and who they can bring in and how many jobs they'll be able to create and what kind of, notature they'll get for getting these programs in. So that, I mean, it's great that they're going to do the hype to get it done, but they don't want to be left behind. And that's why a lot of them are trying to get it into their legislature currently.
Also, I just want to say a couple of you have sent me some private messages, and thank you. I appreciate your care and honesty there.
I really wish we could just have healing for healing's sake and not commodify it. And here we are, and our work as spiritual leaders is to hold that space and to bring love into the world and healing into the world in many different ways.
Yeah.
Which we do at the Chaplaincy Institute and in that bigger place, but and you do, Jennifer, and your colleagues here. It's beautiful. It's beautiful.
Thank you.
I think I'll close our time now because we've already, oh my gosh, it's only a minute left. But if anybody has questions and would like to stay and ask anything privately about the Chaplaincy Institute or to Jennifer, we'll hang on for a little bit. But I want to thank you all very much for coming today and honor your work and healing, whatever modality it takes and wherever the divine path opens for you. Many, many blessings to you all. And thank you. I'm going to play some more of that beautiful music.